I just wanted to give you the two instances of what a professional from my side faced in what was a promoter-driven enterprise, both promoter-driven enterprises and such. And to me, that has been the dictum at Manipal where I worked and today.
We have two accomplished leaders, Sri Shankar Vanavarayar, President, Kumaraguru Institutions, and Mr. V. Sivaramakrishnan, CEO, Apollo Knowledge, for this fireside chat on Leadership Cockpit.
Good morning again, and very happy to be here amongst friends from this region, friends from other places of India, colleagues, and I had one of my professors too, because he wasn't sure about the student, but but wonderful to be here, and thank you for doing this yet again. I think it's very, very important that many of us in this country meet on such fronts. But after the morning session, after the inaugural session, listening to a professor, a consultant, and I don't know what to call Mahesh, somebody who's he was called a conscience keeper, but then representing views as an intellectual, because I don't want to call you a journalist or a person of from media, because I think I'll call you an intellectual at the moment. After that, now I don't know whether I have to change my script a bit. Me and Shiva had a chat yesterday on what this is. Hemant and I spoke about this topic. And what is Coimbatore? And I'm going to, I told Shiva that I'll set the context a little and then we'll get into this conversation. We are trying to make this chat because it's called Fireside, and there isn't any fire in the room, but there is an LED, and I'm trying to see if we can make this alive, engaging, where we build a certain conversation, we agree and disagree, and hopefully bring all of you into the conversation very soon. So we have about, we were told we have about 40 minutes, but I'm not sure we're a little late, but we'll try to do 35, 40 minutes is what I think. The topic is Leadership Cockpit. For some of you are thinking, what is it? Hemant said all of us are leaders in this room, and all of us are doing some amount of leadership in our lives, whoever we are. But the subline says balancing, preserving legacy and scaling the future. Balancing, preserving the legacy and scaling the future. All the three speakers in the morning were extremely optimistic about the future in higher education, with professors setting the fact that we might regain our position. We will gain the position, and I think Nana came back to say we will regain the position. But then Mahesh reminded us to gain the position what we have to be. I want to set the context a little by saying the last 5 decades, Indian higher education has become the second largest in the planet. China just being there by a bit before us. We were, in 1976, 3 million people in higher education with 20% in private. That is the statistics that ChatGPT gave me. But now, we are 43 million in higher education, and we are 50% in private education. Now you see the change. We were 20% in 3 million. We are 50% in 43 million. And imagine, put it in, India will be one of the largest private higher education players in the history. Because China, I'm not sure what to call it. It's somewhere in between. Education from being a degree, and this was spoken about a little earlier, from being a degree of social standing, for getting skills and knowledge, and then in the last 20 years or 30 years of becoming a placement tool, what is it going into? If you go to kindergarten classes, lower school, you will understand the purpose of education now. How much they're reminding students. There are students who come in a party and catch the father's hand and saying, you can't drink Coca-Cola, forget other things, because it's poison. There are students who are telling parents and what is vision and AI, and schools are telling young kids on how skills and talent and so many other things. So education today is engagement, it's internship, it's training, it's experiences, I think, what is very important. Of course, with all this, the organization has to be competitive. We can keep talking about what it is, but let's also not forget, even our freedom movement had so much of purpose. It had a rigor, it had a system, it had a great sense of communication, but communication not to tell people, but to involve people. India comes from a culture where we were doing this very, very differently. Now, the expectation in the market is not to have a sage on stage alone. We want sages, but the stage is becoming different. It's becoming a playing ground together. Again, Professor reminded us, go out and have a pizza. Have a character to yourself that you can network and talk about yourself apart from your position, your subject, but what else can you do? I think education is now asking for inspiration, engagement, experience, empowerment, and exposure, and not just knowledge, skills, and jobs and certifications. I think India has done well, very well in numbers, and all of us in this room are net result of those numbers. But we are not yet at the high table, but maybe the future high table will be defined by India and what our metrics is. Some changes will happen while we'll also have to change. Now, quickly coming to Coimbatore, because Digi in Coimbatore is different from Digi in Delhi. We are far away from every power, from Chennai or Delhi. What has Coimbatore achieved in the past? And interestingly, Shiva has some Coimbatore memory, I believe, and he will talk about it. Coimbatore has regional impact, has been relevant, has been competent to an extent, has even had traces or experiences with excellence. Credible impact has been created through lakhs and lakhs of students from everywhere, and they are everywhere today. Quality is certainly prevalent. Performance is fair. Human capital has been performance-oriented. Governance is certainly of a certain quality in this region. Now, with all this, what are we here for this topic? Now, what is this duo doing here? Now, Shiva has a very, very interesting experience. HCL, Procter & Gamble, Oxford, Manipal, and now with Apollo Education. In between there are two I forgot and I didn't make notes. Very, very interesting experience of an engineer going to do an MBA, working in some of the best corporations in the country and slowly taking this turn towards education. And today he is tasked with taking the multiple units of Apollo's educational footprint, and all of us look at Apollo with health in mind or sickness in mind. But certainly he has been entrusted with looking Apollo with young people, future, talent, and getting India ready in mind. And if you know the legendary founder, Mr. Reddy, and you know how he can imagine for India, and now they're trying to see if they can bring their multiple units together, and he's tasked with that aspect. Now, this topic is about me and him. I come from a fourth generation family legacy. I am, in my family, the first one to work full-time in education, and I don't look at myself as the governance person. My colleagues in the room know that, and they don't like it sometimes, I think. They would have liked to be a person of governance coming for board meetings and convocations, but I go to work every day. But I still represent the family who founded the institution and look at multiple roles, which I'll talk about a little later. And Shiva, interestingly, has been given the role to champion change, to build the consolidation and build things to the future. Of course, by a board and family, but with complete autonomy, freedom, and everything else. Now, all this has been positive so far. Now, what is this topic's relevance is people who ask us in Coimbatore, why is there not a global player in Coimbatore? Why is there not an IIT? Forget IIT, that's the government's call. Why is there not a VIT in Coimbatore? Why is Coimbatore not beating to or hitting to its capabilities? What is missing? What is the masala missing in the current, whereas the past has legacy and credibility? Why hasn't Coimbatore become the Harvard of the South? We still call ourselves the Manchester of the South, and Manchester itself has lost textiles, and Coimbatore has many other flavors. Is it the problem of the leadership matrix? That is conversation that we are going to have. Is it a problem of managing talent, bringing in talent? Is it a culture problem? Is it empowerment problem? Is it a problem of how we do things? So this is what this topic is about. I'm sorry I took a long while to get to this because I wanted to make sure the fireside chat has an experience, has a little bit of excitement, maybe a friction, maybe disengagement. Holding the future. Is there the future not inspiring us to be adventurous, aspirational, and really, really out of the ordinary? So this is the topic, and I'm going to ask Shiva to say a few words about what you do, your Coimbatore experience, and the context, and I have a few questions. And in the questions, we will quickly ask you also to come along, because I think if this chat can get more powerful, and Rajesh reminded us that this is a community and this is what we're doing together. Shiva, over to you.
Thank you so much, Shankar. Just a quick question before I start. How many promoters in this audience? Not bad. Fair number. Thank you. Yeah, Coimbatore is not just a fleeting memory. My first job placement in HCL was in Coimbatore, 1988. And there's a very interesting link to a promoter. So I joined HCL out of campus. And those days we would be sent to Hotel Vikram in Delhi for 30 days of the IBM Blue Book sales training. At the end of 30 days, you had an assessment. And it was very well known that the Coimbatore, because Mr. Shiv Nadar was from Coimbatore. So I was one of the two and came to Coimbatore. I had never ever worked in Tamil Nadu. And I came here. But the connect there, as I pondered over what we discussed yesterday, was that's not a metric or a legacy, but what Mr. Shiv Nadar did, or don't know, but that's folklore, is the toppers always went to his hometown. What followed was even more interesting. His first review, in those days, our guest house in Racecourse Road was the office. Before we moved to what was then the outskirts of Avinashi Road, I looked at the expanse of the flyover. I've been here in my career at Ford as well, but this time I'm coming after maybe 10 years to Coimbatore. Definitely post-COVID. I've never been here since then. The first monthly review in Coimbatore, he did himself. And I had a diktat. He said, Mohan, recall Mohan, my friend, you screw up that relationship, I handled education and corporate. And he told me, if you screw up that relationship, all these managers won't matter, I will review you. PSG Tech is my school, my institution. If I see a Wipro PC in PSG Tech, you've had it. But that was fascinating because there were 6 founders. Shiv Nadar was the principal founder. The trust and legacy that he had and friendship that he had in Coimbatore, he wanted to retain. But that trust and legacy was carried forward by someone who was visiting and living in Coimbatore for the very first time in his life, what I was. I still remember the first day I went to office, and within half an hour I was sent to Salem to make a government collection for PC-80s that were installed in the collectorate. And there is a logic to where I am. And I went to, they said, go there, and they said, go to the Cheran bus stand. What's a Cheran bus stand? Because I think there was TTK Transport that has a different bus stand. So I went there and here, Gobi, and I said, what is Gobi? And I heard of this, which I was good. I visited later. But that 1 year taught me that the legacy of the promoter opened doors for me. I did not have it. There was a flip side as well when you screwed up, and I need to tell you this, when we screwed up HCL Communications, EPABX installation, customer not to be stated, location not to be stated. The owner of that apparel enterprise actually called the two of us. I was an unwitting witness because I had nothing to do with communications, but he said, sales guys are the same. Kaila potti, kalathila tai, vaila poi. And I realized very early in my career the two sides of trust and not maintaining that trust, because it went back to the promoter. Right? And so that was Coimbatore. I was here for a year. I was in Kochi for a year and then moved on. But I came back to Coimbatore. I was at Ford and Jayashree Ford dealer. And I went to the UK for 3 years with Ford, and then I came back. We had a dealership here, and then subsequently they had expanded to multiple locations. And as you expand, you take debt to grow and so on and so forth. And then I came back and did what to a is a dreaded thing that a professional does. I cut the reach. I downsized that operation because it had spread too far and it incurred a lot of debt. And we met 2 years, I was in Ford, and we met 2 years later and said, what you've done for me is incredible. I go to sleep without tension. The downside was I have to wait half an hour, what I used to at ICICI Bank because I owed them 18 crores. Now they don't even meet me for 3 hours. So that's separate. But I just wanted to give you the two instances of what a professional from my side faced in what was a promoter-driven enterprise, both promoter-driven enterprises and such. And to me, that has been the dictum at Manipal where I worked, and today. You succeed as a professional from my side, and then I'll venture later to talk about daringly a little bit of what the promoter ought to do. But from my side is you did not build this business. You did not start this business. You did not have the vision or the purpose for which this institute was created. Don't you dare come and spoil it. Correct it, grow it, and so on. But that stayed with me. And perhaps it was a little easier for me because I was born and brought up in Jamshedpur. And those of us from Jamshedpur, and I'm sure those of you from Coimbatore will not. Anyone asks me, where are you from? I say Jamshedpur. I'm slightly confused of the state because it was Bihar when I was born, is Jharkhand now. But because what the Tatas did in Jamshedpur is incredible. Today in higher education, the highest percentage of 12th standard kids, and I did this data when I was in Manipal, who went into top-rung institutions in engineering and medicine, came from Jamshedpur, because there was an ethos of education, right? I think Maheshwar talked about clones. And I'll continue this disparate thought, but I'll finish after this thought. So I joined Procter & Gamble I did my summer internship, and they offered me, very proud, I was the only pre-placement offer in my campus, the first one. And then when my cohort came to Procter & Gamble, we were clones. Barring 2 or 3 exceptions, every one of us had parents in service or education. Every one of us came from a small town. Hisar, my closest friends came from Hisar, Sonipat, Darbhanga, Naiveli. And there was an ethos, and I understood the way Procter & Gamble then selected, because I then became part, I went back to my campus. And they picked, this was day 1 worldwide. Procter & Gamble today is also day 1 on management campus, right? 150 years. But they picked people who had a strong education, growth to strive for excellence, parents, grandparents, few exceptions. And then I'm going to connect these. And to me, that is very, very important, both for a professional and for the promoter to understand the maintenance of this ethos, the purpose and vision over a long period, and to have professionals who understand that. I think coming from a small town, understanding that ethos has been the single biggest, and I've had fantastic relationship to date with Ranjan, Dr. Reddy I met. He reviews me it's going to be 93 on the 5th of February, Founders Day. And I have a review meeting with him every 15 days, without fail. He comes to work 6 days a week. I tell my kids, I tell my parents, I tell anyone who will listen. Comes in a suit and a tie 6 days a week at this. So I think if not by accident, but I have seen these organizations recruit, nurture and carry on one side the purpose, value and ethos that runs in that family, purpose for which they started an institution, the kind of people they entrusted that responsibility. Because I've seen spectacular failures as well. So I leave you with that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I think, it was insightful, but any message shared as a journey in the real experiences is very powerful because it's insightful and it's not jargon, it's not powerful messages, but very, very insightful of what you shared from your experience in HCL, how PNG selected people, how the Apollos the ecosystem is getting done. But sort of talking about leadership, and I want to call it the leadership matrix at the moment. Trust, power, freedom versus ownership. How to do it? What is the pace of doing it? And what is the need in transition? And I also always talk about my family business experience, and I speak about in those forums. And I think at some points in family business we forget there is a horse, there is a jockey, and there is a horse owner. And sometimes in family business we think we are the horse, the jockey, and the horse owner, right? The horse is the organization or the business or the institution. The jockey is the leader, and the horse owner is the person who sort of breeds it, keeps it, or whatever. How do we have this right balance from your experience, from your various organizations, both professional, family run, and that ecosystem? And this is very important because yesterday you also said you had a clear distinction in Manipal on how the services functions and the academic functions. I want to talk about leadership coming from a promoter angle, but also there are also academic leaders in the room, a career academic room. How do we balance that? Services are quintessential to education today, not that academics runs it all, and it can't run it all because there are business functions. Promoters have their interest, strategic purpose interest, but also progressive interest. How is this matrix going to work, or how is it working, or how should it work?
Sure. I think for Coimbatore, you also asked why has Coimbatore not produced a VIT. To me, I think Coimbatore should ask itself, why has Coimbatore not produced a Manipal? And I say that not out of professional rivalry, because Manipal, one would argue, across disciplines, really has not just created an institution, but has created leaders across each. So it's very interesting, and I'll take a little bit of time. I spent a day at Manipal, and this was 2008. 2008 beginning, Manipal for the first time, driven by private equity, coming into the services side, was creating a services company as distinct from the academic institution. And at that time, we had Manipal University and Sikkim Manipal University in Sikkim. That was it. One institution in Malaysia, Malacca Manipal Medical College. And that day was interesting. I spent a meeting Ranjan, spent a huge amount of time in India, England were touring, or whoever was touring. Cricket match was. So I spent 2.5 hours over lunch with him, and 2 hours was on cricket. But I think it was important because at the end of the day, he knew I would join, I knew I would. And it was incredible. I met his father, Dr. Pai, for all of 15 minutes. And it's incredible because what he said multiple years later, Dr. Pratap Reddy. So Dr. Pai, in that, just when he shook hands with me as I left, said, you will have enormous power. You will dictate the course of a lot of money. Please ensure that the reputation that I have is not destroyed. That's all he did. I repeat that to everyone who joins my organization. I meet every individual who joins the organization, virtual or otherwise, to this day, but I repeat that. It's almost identical, the choice of words Dr. Pratap Reddy chose when I joined in September 21. He said, we've been trying to get you pre-COVID, so on, you've joined here. This will be the last job. You will not go anywhere else. Please build Chittoor into a legacy that people will remember we for, even more than Apollo Hospital. And that was all. He just said, Chittoor for the legacy I have built there, because Apollo Hospitals is already done, his perspective. So, how did that journey begin? And I'll interplay with the academic side as well. I think from a promoter side, Manipal embarked on this journey with Anand Sudarshan, the president of Education Services, and Srinivas Joshi was the CFO. We were the three leaders. I think Ranjan Pai, to my mind, is the best promoter I have worked with or heard of, and continues to be for what it is. And I'll give 2 or 3 examples. So I come from a marketing background, and I looked at the expansion of media and methodology and so on. Found that we were pretty archaic, what we were doing. The agency was one of his cousins, which is how it grew. Without getting into too much detail, he and one of the private equity founders, one of the private equity investors, actually helped me read a note to the board recommending replacement of that agency with Group. Group M is the largest media syndicate. I came from P&G. I had worked with Group M, JWT, and so on. But we put metrics in place. Then Ranjan said, leave Manipal University. At first, I didn't understand why it was, but I later realized that it is equally important for a promoter to welcome in a professional, but more so for a professional. I guess my learning has been, in this journey of professionalism versus legacy and family run, there is no one, you stop operating it the same way. So in the larger war, Ranjan taught me, lose a small battle. Let Manipal University account still be handled by that agency. What we did was shared metrics. And as Manipal University scaled, we opened campuses. Why we opened Asia, the agency found itself out of depth, out of competence to handle this scale. I actually got Group M to try and buy them out. But I learned a big lesson that day about keep the bigger picture in mind, be prepared, because Ranjan goes home, goes to Manipal, at the family table is his cousin. How does he explain that? Right? The second, and that remains the toughest thing for a professional, is legacy. So in any business, and I've seen this with Ford dealerships or in educational institutions, today, Dr. Pratap Reddy's first secretary, when he was in HM Hospital, one room, till today the secretary in the room he has at Apollo Main, 44 years later. That's the age of the institute. And you learn to respect that. The conflict is when it happens. As you scale, you realize that some people who've been with the promoters over the last, let's say, 15, 20 years, are not going to take you on this journey as you go forward. And I learned not to make that change abruptly, but a planned one where I took the promoter into confidence, and over 18 months we made changes. Everyone found a job somewhere else in the group. And we found the balance between, because scaling completely in education, technology comes in, but it depends on people. You really have to have the right people with the right competence to scale. And we found the balance, and in over 8 made those changes. Now shift to the other side on academics. And I still remember the first marketing enrollment presentation we made to Manipal University, and the then Vice Chancellor, who I should not name, referred to one of my teammates as boy. Boy, please don't call my student a customer, because our marketing professional called him a customer. And I did two things. First, told all my team that we've been brought up that way. It's very easy, right? Even today, when a professor comes in, you stand up. I find myself standing up. Anytime, any teacher comes in, you have to stand up. Any elder comes in, stand up. I said, please address them as sir, please get that, and you have to earn their respect. But I did go to the Vice Chancellor and said, perhaps you could find a different word. He's not there as a boy, he's come there as a professional and worked. I think what helped us was to have a regular rhythm of reviews, even to date, when we have Apollo University. When the reviews are done, I tell my entire team not to address me, but to address the Vice Chancellor, to date. When we have a review of the medical college, I tell my team the review has to be with the dean. Please address the dean. I just happen to be sitting, right? I think, just try to give you 2 or 3. A lot depends on, and I told you this, I told my entire team that I can fund the expansion and I approve the budget. Vice Chancellor or the registrar has to sign the letter and the check. I can't write to UGC, they can. Maybe I can edit. Please respect that difference. Continue to respect that difference. I think in my team, I've noticed those who did, flourished. Those who didn't were spectacular failure.
I think you know where this conversation is going. But I also, my younger fraternity in the room, I see Avanti, I see Lasya, I see Gayatri, I see Ajit, I see Saravana. These are all sort of the next gen promoter managers who are also spending time either full-time or part-time in the organizations that their father or father-in-law or grandfather or somebody founded. Now, what do you think should be the aspiration for a younger person who looks at this as a progressive? How do they build teams, mature, young, modern, cultured, look at context? If somebody is working in Kumarapalayam like a Gobi, do you work for that context, or you think global? Do you emulate an Ashoka or a Flame, or you look at context? I'm sure because Chittor is not a Chennai, Bangalore or Hyderabad, right? So there are realities. But at the same time, you spoke about Manipal. Before Manipal was a town. After Manipal is a brand. So how do we do this? How do some of us reimagine this future? What do you think out of your experience and what you're building now? What do you think for us?
That's a lot tougher to my mind, and I went through that. So the entire process of joining as group CEO, handling what is Apollo Knowledge. So sorry, just to give that context. So Apollo Knowledge handles everything in education, skilling, and workforce enablement across the Apollo hospital. So pharmacies, the hospitals, clinics, and so on and so on. The entire process of my selection and my reporting and letters were all done by, as my chairman calls, 2G, second generation. Now he's got 3G, the grandchildren are all. And in the family, he doesn't have a direct combination of 2G and 3G on one line of business. So the children of a second generation promoter report into a business which is handled by another, right? 4 daughters, multiple kids. And so I remember the first conversation I had with Karthik Reddy. He was in the UK, I was here. He'd known that I was coming in, but he had no role in my selection. It was a slightly weird kind of friendship if you look at it. I think the first thing we did, we had multiple virtual. Consequently, every time we had an opportunity, it faced. I think from a professional, it was very important to understand and when I say Karthik, is the younger generation, to understand their vision for a leader from our side, both academic and otherwise. By the way, when I say this, the other thing that I've done, and I think I should have said this before, I always insist that the heads of institutions have a direct line with the promoter. They don't need to go through me. I insist that the promoters have a regular interaction with the institution. It's a joke in Apollo that some of the promoters are scared of me. I ensure that I monitor the calendar. I go to that extent because it's extremely important that the heads of the institution, Hyderabad, Chittoor, we have 14 nursing colleges spread across the country. They all need to understand Apollo. And no one better to teach them that than the promoter. I insist that they have that. So any event, convocation, we are having convocations next month, promoters are invited, there is a message if they can't be in person. So there is always a contact of the heads of the institute. So when I speak about that, it's the same. I think it is very important for a professional to understand what's in it for the newer generation. And there's no right or wrong answer. Some of the newer generation would want, like you, to be absolutely. Others might be, hey, there are other things that I run. This is important. I want to continue the family legacy and the trust and the brand, but I want to be involved. There are two. I want to be involved but not run it. I want to be involved and run. I have the latter. I have the involved, not directly run it, but very clearly in my path, I give up this role at some point in time. That's another conflict. I say 3, they say 7. So we have to find a midway. A proper job of mine is to coach and bring them to get involved. So, and this is an interesting, as of late last night, I am heckling Karthik. I am going to Hyderabad, you're coming, you're spending 3 hours with the campus. Very interestingly, the person who taught me this was the chairman of the board at Manipal, Mohandas Pai. He saw me at a banking campus in Bangalore and he said, every security guard knows you here. I want the same in Dubai, Malaysia, Nepal. That's what we did. Infosys campuses were built. Mohan and I, or our banking academies, walked every brick campus. I think it's very important, not just for the professional and academic leaders to do that. I think for the next gen, I think one of the big things that professionals see, at least we saw with Dr. Pratap Reddy and the others, was they built it. I think what they would like to see from the next generation is that level of involvement, engagement. You might not want to run it daily, but you need to know what I'm running. Because then there is empathy, there is that connect that happens. I've gone with Karthik to Chittoor, I've gone with him to Aragonda, the village where Dr. Reddy comes from and where there is a nursing institute. I am definitely taking him to Hyderabad to go through the... So 2 or 3 things. One is to understand what the next generation wants, how involved, how engaged they want to remain. Second, I think is to ensure that line. So Karthik and I have a one-on-one every week. I have a one-on-one with Ms. Preeta Reddy every Wednesday. Today she's traveling to a board meeting. I am here, but we will meet on Saturday. That has worked for me. That's worked for me in Manipal. That's worked for me. Every week we are engaged. I think what we also did was, second thing was, where does your role and your boundary end and where does my role and my boundary? Because one of the areas we have which could be conflicting is our UK operation. Based there, hands-on, but I run the operation. I go to the UK every quarter. I make sure that I spend a week there, but at all meetings, Karthik and I are there together. Every meeting. Government, industry, and we are there together. In fact, on our campus, which is near Manchester, which is some distance away from London, we insisted that Karthik has a room as well next to him. And we work out of that when we... The third thing, when I joined Manipal, I said this when I joined Apollo, I was very honest with promoters and said, please feel free to have meetings with whoever you want, because there are people as promoters, I totally understand. You also need to keep an eye on me. You need to keep an eye on what the professionals are doing. Completely understandable. And you meet people. But if you expect me to follow through, please tell me what you have done. Said this very, very openly, very honestly to the promoter. If I don't know, I will not act on it. Please tell me. Corollary to that addition that I've said is, if you hear anything, please bring it up. Whatever it is. I think that's the test. To me, the final test is, if the promoter has heard something disconcerting, have I instilled in them the confidence to bring it? Worked perfectly in Manipal. I would have said I would have been in Procter & Gamble. That's the other thing. You talked about women, and I really admire that. In Chennai and Coimbatore, I love the number of women who are there. My wife is a civil servant. I moved out of, and she's very proud of this as well. I moved from Procter & Gamble because my wife had to be in Chennai. P&G had no operation. When we moved to the UK, she took leave, moved to Bangalore together. We came to Chennai. And one of the things that we've done is balance that career and taught that to our children. I talked to my colleagues. I think it's a very important part, and I have ensured that the promoters recognize that as well. With husband and wife working and younger children, I think the fascinating thing is how the newer generation promoters, because they themselves have the same challenge, right? So Karthik for sure. So we've got that connect. So the last part of that conversation of what you've heard and please tell me works, because now I have got skip levels with my reporting level every fortnight. And I actually give them the choice to have me or not have me. And to me, that's the level of maturity and confidence in the relationship.
I'm not sure, there is layers of how to do attention, how it can be done, and what is the right way. And there is no right, perfect way for any of our institutions, but then I think there are enough lessons in this context. I'm conscious of time, but I'm pausing now to take a few questions from the audience. There are, I'm sure, 4 kinds of people here. There are the promoters, there are academic leaders, there are ecosystem players, and there are invitees and speakers. So we can take questions from anybody, and we'll try taking 1, 2, or 3, and then sort of answer between us. Anybody else who wants to join this conversation, ask a question, prompt, ask, working, not working. Any thoughts in the room? Yes, yes. I'll take the gentleman there. Maybe we can hear you. I think we can hear you. So what are the 3 or 5 things that institutions in Coimbatore must do to make sure we go to the Ivy League, even though I would like to call it the Sandal League or something. Ivy League is not in favorite condition today with President Trump, but then yes, we have, and with Professor saying that this is what will define it in the future, yes. What are the 3 things that we should do is one question. Aman, yes. Is this a question that you can't ask me at work, or? Okay, we'll take one more before we answer in anything else. And to be honest, there's no right and wrong question or a context. whatever is in your mind, because you have to bring some fire into the fireside chat. Disagree, or you have to throw a difficult question. I like, when I said it, I know one guy who will ask that, but then the other gentleman, yes. It's a difficult, easy question. I'll come to it. And the young man, yes, Amir. After him, yes.
Startup in Coimbatore. So when you say legacy, when passing on legacy from generations, what is something that gets left out when you are in from the first generation, second and the third? What is some kind of we all pass cultures. Promoters all pass cultures, they pass discipline, pass legacy. What is something that is intentionally left out to the third generation?
So maybe I'll come to you after. Maybe we'll do the 4 and then we'll do the next 3. Do you want to, and Sonia after?
Yes. Yeah. I think someone, Maheshwar and others talked about diversity. I think truly what made Manipal stand out as a pan-India global brand name was the diversity that we drove in student, faculty, and the team, management team. We had people working in Manipal from across the country. In fact, Dr. Pai, to bring discipline in, had the old rule of having someone with an armed services background as the director on campuses, right? And inevitably, so we had Brigadier Pabla, you had Nagra, all from other parts of the world who ran that. But diversity was really core. In fact, I'm fighting that at Chittoor because we have a 50% government convener quota in students in health sciences. I am really pushing to see that the other 50% is from not just Andhra Pradesh, but outside, not just within South India, from across, right? Otherwise, and I keep saying this to the team at Chittoor and here, we would become a university for Andhra Pradesh, by Andhra Pradesh, the whole ecosystem, which is not very good for an institution to aspire to the next level. So diversity is clearly one part. The other one which the IIMs are doing is mobility. I think now, if you're an institution in Coimbatore without branches, that doesn't work. But in Manipal, we had that ecosystem. Middle to senior levels of leadership went across institutions. So I can take a name, Gopal Krishna Prabhu. GK Prabhu is from the Manipal Institute of Technology, director of the institute, became registrar of the university, went to Manipal University, Jaipur, is now at Sikkim Manipal University. We actually put a system where people would move. So they saw other things, they went in, they came back, and this moved to attending international conferences. Dr. Vinod Bhatt, who I enticed to come as the Vice Chancellor at Polo University, Manipal, was the biggest driver of international relations, programs, articulation. Sir talked about 2 years here. Manipal did the first articulation program, ICAS program, for 2 years of engineering and moved to other institutions. And giving a budget to faculty for research. Today I've written 2% of revenue across my institutions for research. For training, for research. Today we actively train our faculty because faculty doesn't know how to write a technical research paper. They have the thoughts, they know this, but it's a science, right? That was driven in Manipal. So other than diversity of student mix, employees, faculty, the other part was internationalization. I don't know what else to call it, but global mobility. More professors in Manipal attended conferences, moved out, brought people in. It was very important for Manipal to bring the world to Manipal. They were the first, they used their strength, which was the Kasturba Medical College. So a lot of medical conferences started there. Then the engineering counts, then allied health. Professor Rajshekhar, who so bringing the world to Manipal to see what it is and taking Manipal to the world. I would recommend that. I have a fascinating example with Naren Karthikeyan, who was a brand ambassador here, and you all remember the Ford icon? So I was the brand man. That's still my baby. But with the help of Naren, I took that to every part of India. Naren and I traveled across Chandigarh. Wherever we launched there, he was there. So it's very important to bring the world to Coimbatore and to take Coimbatore to the world, which you've done in industry, by the way. Not so much in education. I'll be very honest, not so much in education. So that's the second part. The third is really to set benchmarks and metrics. It's amazing how Manipal set clear benchmarks. I mean, one of the first one, with the group HR head, Nishit Mohanty, we set performance metric for academics, including the first 360-degree feedback from students on a session taken class, which is common in foreign universities. Poll a class. We did that at Manipal. We brought performance-based metrics into academics. I've carried that in Apollo. For the first time, differed from professional. So if you are in enrollment and let's say, hypothetically, performance-based variable pays 30% of your CTC, we started at 15% for all academics based on ranks of students who came in. One of the things we did in Manipal was what was the lowest and highest rank of students coming in, and we've done that over the years. I do that. And there are external and internal metrics that all of us review and is published at board meetings. Those matrices keep going up. That striving for excellence stood out in Manipal. Didn't matter that day. So these were three things. Governance, I'll talk about, which is obvious in some respects. Some respects, regulation forces that. But these would be the three.
Fantastic. I think great points and something emulatable, urgent, and things that maybe are nascent but not done in the whole broad big scale. On the parent aspect, you have a comment.
Sure. Slightly outside the context of this one. I think all institutions do open days. In our time, parents had a bigger say in the selection of the institution or the course or whatever. I mean, my dad said, engineer bane. I had no choice. But I think young adults themselves, I think the parents are realistically left out of the decision making to a large extent. It's a tough one. I learned at Oxford in Hong Kong, in schools, on the student app, parents had to take prior permission from the teacher to attend and ask the teacher about the progress of their kid during specified minutes. Otherwise, the school found itself under pressure from parents dictating, absolutely, and dictating something else is happening which is very common in India, by the way. That kid in that school is already at Pythagoras theorem, why are you still at numbers? But they did that. The other thing I learned as recently as now is from Kriya. A friend of mine had a son who was attendance issues, went to the institution and they said, who are you? I said, I'm the parent of this. Why have you come here? Call you. I said, but this is the problem. Your son joined this institution when he was 18. He's an adult. He will handle himself. He has a problem, he has to tackle it. Look, to open days, communication, I've switched. I've switched completely from myself being my whole career or in education being dictated from what my parents said should be to where I am. I believe young adults have to take the responsibility that comes with you turning an adult. My CEO at OUP told me to please insist on an adult-to-adult conversation. In India, you have a child, and it's stuck with me. I think when a kid turns 18, parents are there and parents need to keep track. I think the onus is on, and I'm sticking to higher education. The onus is on the individual to take responsibility.
I also think if we know, and the examples quoted were institutions and ecosystems were very clear and they knew what they were doing. They were not doing mass cut copy paste of systems processes. If they stood by something, the individuals of that high quality, and they just answer in the same thing, even though there might be, if you're thinking of specific incidents, I'm sure there are realities. But then on a broad scale, I think it's a fantastic answer. On the two other questions, which also had family and legacy, you asked me to pick amongst an uncle and a father and a grandfather and a great-grandfather. You know, two of them from up there will look at me if I choose an answer. Two of them who allow me to do this answer will have a problem if I pick an answer, right? So always I look for grace, but I also look for a job. No, I have to go back to a job. But I think the answer is very clear. To be very honest, in the job that I do, in the way that I do it, I have multiple experiences. But if you ask me for inspiration on how I do things and what I want to do, my grandfather stands out. I don't think I have. But in the excellence on how I do it, who keeps reminding me, only today I haven't got a WhatsApp, my father keeps reminding me. But my uncle, my father keeps reminding me that I've not grown up. You know, that's what fathers do. And they keep pushing you on that. But my uncles have also given me space, who have given me great space to do, but keep prodding, reminding, and such of those things. This matrix is difficult. If you are under 30, it really brings pressure to you. If you've crossed 30, it gives you confidence. You know how to act. You've learned the art of traffic management or driving through it. I think there are enough things to learn, but my grandfather stands out in that met. So there's no competition, thankfully. Both of them are okay with that. On your question, what gets left out? Many things get left out. Our latest presentation in Kumaraguru, interestingly, is going to talk about Sarvodaya and Antyodaya and all that. We are going back to basics. Because we also get cluttered and getting confused on saying, everybody's saying it, should I say it too? And thanks to Mahesh, he hard hit me. I took serious notes on saying, I don't have to talk about it. It doesn't mean you or academics or metrics or outcomes or blah, 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 blah. But what you stand for cannot change. Or you can relook at it at a generational view. Maybe that didn't make sense anymore. Maybe the world has changed for some things. We're taking some of those choices. But other ways to go back, to have continued conversations with generations and further, right? So once there was an incident where people had gone and given him feedback, his generation people have gone, he called me, asked me, I gave him data, and he would always react sharply, but he will keep quiet if I gave him data. And that happened over dinner. Next morning, he called me for the meeting. I mean, I went into the room, I thought it was a chat. And he had three of these very, very senior individuals, very, very illustrious senior individuals. I can't name them here, but people that any of us would respect. And all of them smiled, and then he even positioned me. He said, he said, patted on the sofa next to him and said, sit here. And then he looked at them and said, solunga. Then all of them smiled. They were in a conversation. I was not ready I didn't know what was happening, right? But then they gave feedback, but then he stopped looking at them and looked at me and said, yeah, why don't you take the feedback, but then manage the way you want. Also played that role very well, right? But you have to listen. You have to listen, you have to understand, articulate, go back and research and study. There is enough of a lot of wisdom, and the wisdom is very useful from any which way possible. Samir, Sonia, quickly.
Just the one thing on the data. Bharat Patel, the Vice Chairman and Managing Director at Procter & Gamble. So two of us in our batch got promoted to brand manager, called us and then said, Bharat is a Gujarati. Ek baat batata hu, and I'll tell you this. Basically, he said, in the absence of data, the highest paid judgment in the room wins. If you come to my room without data, I will always be the highest. What I say will matter. These are among the things. People who work for me get pained with these things I drop, but it's so true, especially with professionals working with promoters.
And I'll also give you the illustration, because somebody had gone and told him that in Kumaraguru, the systems had changed, HR people are doing recruitment, academicians are not taking the file and call. This was the complaint. Then I went and told him, this is not an institution where one principal can do everything anymore. It's very large. You have to have systems and processes. They're aiding the process, and the committee takes call, and there naturally the right people are taking the call. And he heard me through, and he found it okay, and he said, yeah, that's how it works, but then take feedback. I think that loop is very important. Samir.
Second visit in Coimbatore, But what I realize, or maybe a suggestion which you could take positively, not much emphasis on the alumni network in a situation in Coimbatore where you have most of the people who are captives here. So that was something which you need to work. Second, Coimbatore always has been a multi-generation business community, and we do not see anything very aggressive on the family business entrepreneurship part. The most Ivy League got created or institutions of excellence, they had some USP of what they produced as students. So maybe a suggestion to look at entrepreneurship, family business, for traditional businesses in the area could be a differentiator to you, and investments on alumni. Because you have alumni across the globe, how many of them are talking to you or they are taking Coimbatore to the world and bringing back the talent of diversity which was discussed. And finally, don't take it otherwise, but many a times legacies become liabilities. So you will have to rethink that as family-owned institutions, because you will have to bring collaborations, international institutions, technology to scale up to go beyond Coimbatore. So that was some.
And Dr. Samir is somebody who, I mean, I've had chats on some of these things, but he leads the whole aspect in multiple aspects, but one aspect is bringing Harvard Online to India and working with institutions across the country, but also sits on the board of some of the largest cluster of institutions in Maharashtra with thousands and lakhs of students, but also involved in the transition of it with some of these courses. And he's talking from things that he's done. He's not proposing. Thank you so much. Sonia.
Yes. So intergenerational continuity, family legacy is a wonderful thing, and it does not hold you back. If you let it hold you back, it will hold you back. But it can also take you forward, because usually there's a great vision that things started from. Today's generation, if you see, is very prolific. It's very different. For instance, I have a daughter who's a musician and wants to be a musician. She's very clear, but there aren't enough music schools. Or designers or creative. They're so creative. Are we responding? Is the fourth generation, fifth generation, are we responding to the next generation? So it's good to have that legacy. How do you take it forward? What would be your one-line advice? I'm putting you in the spot to the next generation. So either one of you. So, and going back, 28 years when we started working with Manipal, our advice to Dr. Ranjan was that your grandfather was someone who was inspired by life, and design research showed us that, and they valued that and said that why don't we take it forward and make this idea of destination Manipal, which is still used, and create this idea of inspired by life and take the legacy forward and create students who are inspired by life, doctors who are inspired by life and not by money.
Summer of 69.
Yes, and the summer of 69. We said, don't show buildings in your calendars. Then it'll look like it's Manipal. That's what they were saying. Instead, and they were saying things like every pie counts. And we brought it up. And they accepted it. We could bring it forward, as a young design office. And we said, let's totally reframe this. Become the first human-centered brand out of the country. And destroy all the logos and create a new brand which everyone adopts. So we destroyed something to create something. So what is your advice to the next generation, and a lot of them who may be here, to acknowledge the fact that it's a very different new generation that's coming up? And are we ready for it even? So that's what.
I'm going to speak from my experience. In fact, I think for the newer generation of, I meet a lot of other promoters who are of the same age, 40s, 30s and 40s and so on. I think the one thing they get is the new generation. I think they get it better than me. They get it. Because I've seen, Karthik, Harshad, I've seen multiple others, not just the Apollo family, I've seen multiple others. They are in the same media as the students, unlike their parents or unlike me. For me to get to Insta comes with, should I be on Insta, should I not? But for Karthik, I think they connect with the newer generation. Actually, I see the challenge of learning from legacy to be the bigger challenge for the newer generation as the significant challenge, because experience they've studied, most of them have studied abroad, have had global experience, they've come back, their kids are studying abroad. They connect with the newer generation in terms of information being not just restricted to the location and so on and so forth. From my perspective, the challenge is to understand a little bit of what was and how it got created than what will be. One of the interesting things, and you had a part in that, I know it happens in all, we've got that in all, at least till I left, in all Manipal institutions and now at Apollo, is the timeline. We put one wall of the campus, how a patient journey in a hospital from admission to discharge has to happen in a manner is something that I think, I'm just taking one example to learn. I have actually seen the newer generation completely adapt and adopt to newer possibilities, newer ways of. I think the struggle has been to. I've struggled with saying that fully accounted turnaround in education is a 7 to 8 year time frame. It's not a 3 year, unfortunately, market cap going 5 times. I've actually struggled more on that perspective, because an institution doesn't fill, if you take a manufacturing, an institution doesn't fill the pipeline for 6 years, because the first cohort is the smallest. The second cohort is bigger than the first. It's only when you come to the 4th year that you've got, in Manipal, the 4th year, we've got 1150 students. For the next 3 years, if I don't grow, I'll have 1150 into 4, whereas I started with 175. And I think this cadence and this rhythm in education and healthcare is where I find the challenge with the newer generation, because they've come up with, all of them invest in multiple markets, they look at shorter term returns. So for me, that's been the slight challenge in healthcare and this, because these are not, both these sectors have a rhythm of growth. Yes, there is disruption, but there is an inherent rhythm that is very important.
See, you're saying do things differently and yet have patient capital in that sense.
If I can also add, I think sometimes there's overemphasis on worshipping the past in terms of learning from the legacy. To keep the flame burning, and sometimes is to undo things. You know, I get once in a way told, oh, this is what he would have, and I always think it's funny that I spent more time with people who quote him. I worked under him, he's my grandfather. If at all, then people sometimes give you DNA benefit. I know that, right? I think it's good to codify, because we also don't lose track. But the codification should not be a limitation, because times change, everything's changed, but the ethos remains. Like this beautiful phrase, I don't think legacy or heritage or culture is the ashes, but it's the flame. Correct? If you keep the flame going and you keep changing, I think is very important. It's a challenge sometimes, but yes, that's what it is. If some of you are wondering why I'm going on and we are going on, it's because the two dynamic men have given us the time. Because the two dynamic women leaders could not be here, because that session got eaten up by this session. And thanks to your question, if some of you are wondering why the program was going, but thank you so much. And I think if I have to summarize, and there are more questions, and I think a session finishing with more questions, seeking more clarity with many ideas that we can do is hopefully we've given, in Hemant, I hope we've given you a reason to think we are the right invitees for this topic, hopefully, and not time fillers in the process. But I think, Shiva, I mean, it was lovely chatting with him yesterday, and we got to know each other through two women, dynamic women. One, his wife I had met before, and one of the promoters in the family is a dear friend. So we exchanged notes yesterday and spoke, but there's so much to learn. And I also think it's so much to learn because I remember the institution I started in 1984 was completely run by somebody who was an academic leader and not by a family member. Dr. Armugam, who was a principal in Nachimuthu Polytechnic in Pollachi, and he worked till 80. My grandfather was leading him till 90. They built that. right? So we are sort of running this. There are age-old formats to this. Manipal has examples. PSG has examples. There are examples around the country where you've had phenomenal lieutenants who have been, but it's the idea to mentor, it's the idea to trust, it's the idea to partner, but also to keep people aware and keep people in the path, and hopefully we learn with each other. But I think there is proof for multiple speakers that Coimbatore has the option, but we have to do things more and different. Thank you for your sort of good words and trust and assessment of Coimbatore, but I think many of you are also telling us that one has to do more and a lot more. But any closing comments? And thank you so much. This has been a learning, and I'm sure for everybody. But any closing thoughts?
No, thank you so much. I think you've summarized that. Look, I keep saying this. While I grew up in Jamshedpur, I'm generalizing, but places like Chennai, Coimbatore, I think we don't go out on our own. It doesn't come to us naturally to go out and talk about what we've done. Slightly easier in other parts of the world where, and Maheshwar's example of going out and telling the world before you've done it. I think that needs to change just a little bit. It's important to go out and tell the world what you've done. And it's very important to get the world to come in for two reasons. One, to see what you've done, but also to tell you what they have done. I think that's key. And if there is one success story out of that, Manipal, I mean, like you said, get to Manipal is difficult. I don't know how many of you realize it. You go to Bangalore, you go to Mangalore, and then you drive 3 hours. Even now, even today, you have to drive 3 hours to get to Manipal. To get to Gangtok, I mean, I don't even want to tell you how difficult it is to get there. So Jaipur was a blessing when that happened, and I was at the inauguration, and I joked with Mr. Kapil Sibal, who was then this thing that, and Dubai, he came. I said, these are one flight destinations. But to get to Gangtok and Manipal is 3 legs, and the last leg is a 3 or 4 hour car ride. So I think it's very important. That's the only thing I would say. There are tremendous value.
Thank you so much. And we must watch the video, Summer of 69, the Manipal, you go search it, you'll understand. It almost makes the pun on the fact that people land up in this sort of tardy bus and get out and sees there's nothing. But then how life got built, and Sonia and Girish, both of them are magicians in that process. They even helped us position Forge and our liberal arts college. But I think that vision, the same with BITS Pilani, I presume, is fantastic. But I think the conversation over lunch can build this further. Thank you, Hemant and Rajesh, for getting us to talk. Hopefully we have some, I don't know whether fire was there, but at least some thoughts will go back. You bring 2 people like us, we are not going to fight on stage. Hopefully the audience will ask more difficult questions over lunch. Thank you very much. Thank you.